Hello, everyone. Welcome to AMHCA's Town Hall meeting. For this evening, we will be focusing on the Counseling Compact. I am Dr. Beverly Smith, the President and Interim CEO of the American Mental Health Counselors Association. As I shared, this evening we will be talking about the Compact, discussing the ins and outs of the Compact, answering your questions, informing you of everything you need to know about the Compact. This is a national initiative on behalf of AMHCA and not only our state chapters, but also members and non-members. This event is open to the public. We want to make sure that all members, leaders, friends of AMHCA, friends of the counseling profession are aware of the Counseling Compact and what you can do to advance the Counseling Compact. We have some experts here to talk with you and to share information, some from various aspects as they're working with the Counseling Compact. Again, welcome to our town hall meeting, and we will go ahead and get started. As you can see, this is a brief agenda for this evening. I've already done the welcome and the purpose. We will have a Counseling Compact overview by Mr. Dan Loxton, and then we'll have a round table. And in our round table, it will include Mr. Dan Loxton, Dr. Kevin Doyle, Dr. Gray Otis, Dr. Jerry Stevens, and also Ms. Saba Akal. Again, thank you all so much for coming. This is our agenda, and we will go ahead and get started. Mr. Dan Loxton, he's a director for the National Center for Interstate Compacts at the Council of State Governments. And he's going to provide an overview of the professional counseling compact. He is indeed an expert. He knows exactly what to do, the ins and outs. He's the coach. He's navigating us through the legislative and political system. But again, I want to turn over to Mr. Dan Loxton, one of the experts for this evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Smith. I'll share my screen so I can show everybody the presentation. So let me share that. And let me start the slideshow from the beginning. All right. So welcome everyone. We hope you can see that. I don't know what that's doing. My name is Dan Loxton. I'm with the Council of State Governments. Council of State Governments is a membership organization for states. Every state's a member. Every state pays dues. We're a nonpartisan, nonprofit. We're not a lobbying firm. We provide technical assistance to states. And one of the things that we have expertise in and have since our founding in 1933 was we work on interstate agreements, specifically interstate compacts. So just briefly about interstate compacts. Dr. Smith said I had 20 minutes, so I want to make sure I got my timer on.
Dan, one quick message. Yeah. We received a message in the chat that they can only see half of your slide.
Oh, all right. Let me, this is where we're gonna get out of that. Hold on one second. Okay. Sorry, we run into operator error all the time. So let me make this full screen.
It happens all the time. We're used to it.
Now,
filming and keep moving forward.
Let me pull this over here. See if that's going to work. All right, I apologize. I usually have some help at work with this thing. Is that better? Can everybody see the whole screen now?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. All right, good. I wondered what that green bar was. Okay, sorry about that. Me and technology. That's why all the 20-year-olds that work for me are glad they're not here tonight. All right, so an interstate compact, just quickly, I want to go through some things and then we'll get into the counseling compact. It's just a contract between and among states. They're binding, they're very powerful. There's about 250 existing compacts. There's a compacts clause in the U.S. Constitution. They were used they've been used since the founding of the Republic. In the 20th century, states started using them for administrative functions. The first administrative compact was the New York, New Jersey Port Authority, which turns 100 next year. Then the Colorado River Compact, and after that, states were using them for lots of things that they have jurisdiction over under our federal system. There are certain things that are reserved for states, and we want to promote those things. And certainly, occupational licensure is one of those. In the late 90s, the nurses began developing the Nurse Licensure Compact. And, now there's 9 existing and 6 under development. So the benefits are states agree on for a licensure compact, or states agree on a uniform set of licensure requirements. You've got the data system that's housed at the Compact Commission that's used not only to back up the system to issue the privilege to practice in this case, but also to support the ability for states to conduct investigations and mete out discipline. The great thing about these licensure compacts is a lot of times states pass legislation and they kind of leave the regulators behind. With these licensure compacts, everything moves in tandem. The regulator gains the ability to discipline the profession via the interstate compact, and the profession gets the benefit of that, modified borderless practice or borderless practice. So you have to, it requires an FBI fingerprint based background check. That's sort of standard. And again, the compacts preserve state jurisdiction, state sovereignty. So the licensing system for a state stays in effect. The state gets to still enforce its scope of practice. It has jurisdiction over everything that happens inside its borders. The reason that you've seen primarily all of these licensure compacts be in the health and allied health space, although that's changing, is we are becoming a more mobile society. There's a lot of technological advances. Of course, we understand what happened with COVID. There's a deficit of care and the availability of care and access to care. So, states are looking for ways to leverage practitioners from other states. Compact certainly does that. You could essentially practice in 3 different states in one day via telehealth. Again, the sort of practical advancements for current and future generations of practitioners. So the reason that the occupational therapists came to us and wanted to develop a compact in their state boards was because the speech pathologist and audiologist had one, and the physical therapist had one, and they thought they might be at a disadvantage from a recruiting standpoint to get new people into their profession. I mean, that's not the primary reason you want to do this, but that's one of the benefits. And then again, all these licensure compacts support military spouses. All right, and then this is just a brief or a slide that describes kind of the current environment out there. So these are all the existing licensure compacts. The counseling compact had a good day in Ohio, so I expect this to be enacted there with hope by the end of the year. Ohio's enacted 8 of these licensure compacts this year, but that gives you a flavor for what's going on out in the states. States are certainly responding to these. Since January of 2016, you've seen 183 separate pieces of licensure compact legislation get enacted. 43 states are members of 1, 34 states are a member of 3, 11 states belong to 6, and you'll continue to see these numbers pick up. Before, I was looking today at something before this round of legislative sessions in 2022 or 2021, that number was at 137. So you've seen a remarkable amount of legislation get enacted just this year alone. All right, so let's get into the reason we're all here tonight after the background on interstate compacts. Okay, so the counseling compact utilizes what is going to be called a privilege to practice. So, there's a compact privilege and a privilege to practice. They're essentially the same thing. I like using privilege to practice more. They're sometimes with the feds or with state agencies like state Medicaid agencies, the word compact will throw them off. You can always explain it to them in a manner in which they'll get it and understand that it's equivalent to a license. But I think privilege to practice can cut down on some of that. That's what this compact is going to utilize. There's essentially 2 types of compacts, of mutual recognition compacts, which this one is. There's what the nurses do, and the nursing compact essentially works just like your driver's license. You get a home state, multi-state license, and you can go to any other compact member state. The physical therapist created a different model for their mutual recognition. It relied on this privilege. So the state boards of physical therapy wanted a little bit more insight, a little bit more visibility on who was coming in to their state. And they also, frankly, wanted the ability to, potentially have to claw back some revenue. I mean, look, nursing boards typically have a lot of money. Counseling boards, PT boards, OT boards, they don't. And so they were concerned, well, we might lose revenue from out-of-state licensees going away, which we never have seen happen, but I understand the concern. So PT developed this compact privilege model, and that's what the vast majority of the recent compacts have been. So it becomes operational when the 10th member state joins. So once the 10th member state joins, it can begin the process of standing up and doing business. And issuing those privileges to practice. That'll take typically about a year to 14 months for that to happen. So, none of this happens quickly or easy with these compacts, and that's because one, they're very powerful. States desire them because they're binding on each other. They're in a contract with each other. And another reason is they do a lot. So they protect state sovereignty, they protect the board jurisdiction, and yet they allow practitioners, to cross the border without having to get licensed in a state. So that takes time and effort. And it's not quick and it's not easy, but once they're in place, they're really built to last, we've seen. All right, and so again, I mentioned mutual recognition. So what that means is all the member states are agreed to mutually recognize the license that was issued by another member state to allow to get that privilege and then to come into their state. So again, the home state license is mutually recognized by all the other member states. We rely on that home state for many reasons. Your primary state of residence has to join the compact. And the reason for that is, well, there's two reasons. One, what we've heard from states over the years, legislators and boards, is they don't want to have to be out a huge expense to conduct an investigation. So under the compact, all the states are bound together. They have to support each other. They have to help each other in an investigation. So the legislators don't want their boards having to hunt someone down. So, Kentucky has to join for me to be able to access the compact. I just can't come to Kentucky, get a license, and then bam, I'm in the compact. Because if I was in Ohio and Ohio needed to investigate me, they'd come to Kentucky and it's like, can you serve the subpoena on him? Like, well, he doesn't live here. He actually lives in Tennessee. The Tennessee board, the state of Tennessee didn't join the compact. The Tennessee board might help you out a couple of times, but at some point they're going to say, we didn't join the compact for a reason. Things like this, we're finished helping. Even though, again, state boards typically try to help each other. That's one of the biggest reasons we rely on home state. Again, these compacts are designed to not only provide a practitioner with the ability to streamline their access to get into other states, but it's also to support the regulator. Public protection is a crucial component here. So again, we mentioned the privilege to practice. It establishes an interstate commission. All modern compacts establish that interstate commission. That was something, a best practice that was developed by CSG. You have to have an entity that's willing to hold member states accountable and make sure that they're living up to the provisions of the compact. And that's what that interstate commission does, as well as effectuate the terms of the compact. The interstate commission is made up of representatives from the member state. This isn't some entity out there that doesn't have any connection to the profession or the compact. It also houses that licensure data system, which will be created when the compact gets stood up. And then again, this compact is unique because it creates a pathway to licensure via that privilege to practice. So if you change your primary state of residence to another compact member state, the compact charges the member states and the commission and gives them some guidance on creating a pathway for you rather than that initial licensure process. The OT compact has this as well. The difference is the state boards asked for this provision in this compact, whereas OT, it was the traveling OTs. Now, we didn't get a lot of pushback during stakeholder review, but I've always been more comfortable with the provision in counseling because, again, that came from the state boards. We finished up the draft, took it back to the advisory group. We were about to go out for stakeholder review, and the state boards said, could you add this provision? That's something we really desire. We took it back to the project team. They all agreed. We wrote it and then took it out for stakeholder. So again, little more comfortable that the regulators asked for. All right, and then so the public protection provisions, again, the criminal background check, you have to submit information for that. You have to have an unrestricted license, unencumbered license for at least 2 years. Again, we rely on the home state, so we know exactly where people are coming from that access the compact. And then, so for the state boards, they retain control over their scope. They retain control over the initial licensure process and the renewal process in their state, but that doesn't impact the people utilizing the compact. They get access to that centralized data system. They'll upload their licensure system to that. And then again, the state board gets to appoint the delegate to the counseling interstate commission. And the interstate commission only effectuates the provisions of the compact. The interstate commission can't dictate policy to states. It can't take action against the practitioner. Again, it's just there to effectuate the provisions of the compact. All right, so how does a counselor access this privilege to practice? So you have to have a license in your home state. and has to be clean. You have to do the background check. You have to have a social security number or an MPI number. We wanted to give an option because some states shy away from using the social security number. No adverse actions for the previous 2 years. You have to report any adverse actions from a non-member state. You have 30 days to do that, to report that to the Interstate Commission. That onus is on you. Only the home state's continuing education requirements apply. So that's a benefit for practitioners of the compact. You don't have to keep up with continuing ed in all the states in which you're practicing. The privilege renews at the same time as your home state license. So if your home state license renews every year on June 30th, that's when you'll renew your privileges. So you have some, you won't have to track multiple renewal periods. Again, practitioners must adhere to the Practice Act and the laws and regs in the member state in which they are practicing. The practice occurs where the patient is. You have to adhere to the Practice Act and the laws and regs in that state. That's the only way this works. Frankly, you can't, your Practice Act doesn't travel with you. You won't have a defense before the board if you get pulled in and say, well, I can do that in my state. It's like, well, you can't do it here, and you should have known that. The onus is on the practitioner to understand those things. You have to meet any jurisprudence requirements if the state has those. So if the state doesn't have them, obviously you don't have to meet them. But if the state has a jurisprudence requirement, typically those are open book. The state is essentially just locking you in, right? You really can't say, well, I didn't know that provision existed. I couldn't do that. They'll say, well, you say you attested that you passed and took the jurisprudence exam. So sorry, we're not going to accept that defense. And then active duty military personnel. All these licensure compacts have very robust provisions for military spouses. Military spouses on average move every 3 years. We're working with the Department of Defense to create even more of these licensure compacts. So that's one of the benefits that these compacts provide to military spouses. So, all right, the bottom line is, we're increasing access to counseling services. I was exchanging emails with a legislator from Maine recently talking about, different arguments that have come up and, how might we respond to that. I think a very strong argument for your profession in the same way it is for psychologists, although, there's infinitely fewer psychologists, is you're seeing a lot of these companies jump up like Talkspace that are supposedly offering care, and I think people are getting harmed by those, and it's really difficult for regulators to deal with them. And with the counseling compact or with any of these licensure compacts for mental health professions, your legislators and policymakers can be assured that qualified practitioners are coming into the state, and look. If something terrible happens with that practitioner, you have a means to deal with them in a way that, somebody utilizing Talkspace, I would imagine, I know we got board members on here. I can imagine the kind of nightmare it is trying to deal with somebody that accesses your state via that platform. So we're expanding market opportunities for counselors in member states. I know that's not necessarily, the nomenclature that's used around, market share, but it resonates with legislators. A lot of your states you're seeing pass these universal licensure bills. And what we point out to them is, okay, you made it easier for people to come into your state, but you haven't done anything for the practitioners here. You need to give them an opportunity to access markets outside the state. So that's another benefit here. We've talked about military spouses. Facilitates telehealth. In the light of COVID, we've seen what an impact that can make, but I know from working with the psychology Interstate Compact, that's one of our clients. I've worked with them since I've been at CSG. They've got data that shows that an interaction with a mental health professional via telehealth is just as effective as it is in person. So again, I think facilitating telehealth is important. That's another reason the Department of Defense wants to create compacts, especially compacts for mental health professionals, is access to care for veterans. Again, we certify that counselors meet acceptable standards, promote cooperation among counseling compact member state boards. And then again, the consumer protection component, we're not leaving the boards behind. We haven't passed a bill that says, hey, you can come into my state if I can come into your state, and boards figure it out. And the compact has robust provisions around how the compact states will coordinate with each other. A lot of that will be taken care of in rule. but it lays out a foundation for the commission to build the rules to allow the states, again, to effectively regulate the profession, even in a situation where you've got essentially borderless practice. And let's see here. All right, and so there's my contact information. You can reach me anytime. Email me or call me. I'm back in the office. We're hybrid now, so I've been back in the office since June 16th. I never want to work from home again. But that's my email address. That is the absolute best way to get a hold of me. Except Gray, when you're sending me a letter, that probably got eaten by our Barracuda system. So if you send me something and I don't respond, it means I never got it. Our spam filter ate it. So just give me a call. That's my office number there. You can probably find my cell number somewhere on the web, but that's fine. You can call me anytime, day or night. I'm serious, especially when the legislative sessions get kicked off, because we want to provide that support to get this enacted. So with that, I'll stop sharing and turn it back over to Dr. Smith. And thanks again for letting me come and visit with you all tonight.
Thank you, Dan, for coming, sharing, and giving this overview of the counseling compact. As you can see, he is very knowledgeable. He is our go-to. And so we just want to say thank you for helping many states and chapters in AMHCA navigate through this process, and we appreciate it. We know that we did receive several questions in the chat, so just know that we will get to those questions. We want to now move into our round table, where we will have, again, Mr. Dan Loxon, Dr. Kevin Doyle, Dr. Gray Otis, Dr. Jerry Stevens, Ms. Saba Akal, and myself as part of the round table. And so we will go ahead and get started with the round table, and then we'll move into question and answers, okay? And so we want to ask Mr. Dan Loxon, share more about your role in helping individual organizations advance the counseling compact.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we're available to help. So you should reach out to us. I've listed the email addresses of a couple of my colleagues there. We want to help. One of the things that we do is in our technical assistance to the state, compacts are very different than most legislation. They can't be altered. Now, if the legislature has something on the books that we use may not instead of shall not or something like that, those kind of drafting changes, typically we can live with those. But if you're running a bill in a state, please get us a draft of the legislation as quickly as you can so that we can compare it to the Model Act and make sure there's not been any changes. If there have been, we'll be happy to reach out to the legislative drafters and explain. Typically, we don't have to anymore because there's so many of these things flying around, but we'll be happy to interact with them for you, explain to them why it can't be changed and work out a compromise if we need to. Again, if it's legislative drafting issues, again, typically we can work around those, but sometimes we can't. We do have a lot of states. There's a lot of shalls in this document because we want to give directions to the state boards. And you'll have legislators that want to take that out or legislative drafters that want to remove the shalls and just have simple declarative sentences. And I understand their point, but no, we're not going to let you do that. So get us that legislation. We'll review it for you. We'll get back to you and let you know if it's been altered substantively. And if it has, we'll deal with that. If not, you're good to go. And then, we're available to help you with inform or provide a briefing for legislators, legislative staff, the committee, state regulators. If there's people in the Attorney General's office we need to talk to, sometimes you'll run into an assistant AG that say these are unconstitutional. They're not. So we can get our attorneys on the phone and explain those types of things to them. We can help prepare you for a committee hearing. So if you got a committee hearing and you're nervous, I need to walk through some scenarios with you, we'll be happy to get on the phone with you, schedule a meeting, get on Zoom and talk you through those things. And then, we can provide written testimony. And in some cases, we can do in-person testimony. Again, with COVID and traveling restrictions, what have you, that may be a little bit difficult to coordinate. Also, just from a budgetary standpoint, we can't go to every state. You're seeing a lot of states now say we don't want Zoom testimony anymore. Fine. But, we will help you as much as we can. And, we might be able to show up and testify. So don't just think we can't do that. We'll do our best to get there. But, we'll provide assistance as much as you need. So please, again, reach out to us. Again, we want to be helpful. We want this compact to be successful. We want them all to be successful. So don't feel like you can't reach out or contact us, because that's what we're there to do.
Thank you, Dan. And I will say you have been extremely accessible. I know I've called and other members of AMHCA have called and chapters have called, and everyone says he's responsive and they appreciate your work. So thank you so much. Thank you. I'm sorry, I thought someone was saying something. Dr. Kevin Doyle. Dr. Kevin Doyle is the president of the American Association of State Counseling Boards. And as part of our roundtable, we want to ask him a question as well. So Dr. Doyle, what can state boards do to advance the counseling compact?
Thank you, Dr. Smith. I'm glad to be here with everyone today. Thanks for welcoming me and inviting me. I think it depends on the state. So in most states, the board members are appointed by the administration, i.e. the governor. In many states, that prohibits the state boards themselves from taking positions that are inconsistent with the administration in that state. That was the case for the state where I was appointed in Virginia. So the state board could consider the compact as part of their regular business on their agenda. They could hear comment during the public comment period. They may or may not be permitted to take action on the compact as a board. Again, that depends on the rules of the particular state. So in some states, this might be better served by coming from the professional association. So the state chapter of ACA, for example, or the state chapter of AMHCA, reaching out to a legislator. In some states, the compact could be part of the governor's package that goes to the legislature. That's certainly possible. So it really depends on the regulations that apply to that particular state board. A lot of times the state boards, though, are a function of the executive branch of government. So ultimately the governor and the administration would have the say there. So there may be some limits on state boards. So ultimately, it might need to be the profession itself that initiates action. Again, it's hard to answer for 50 states plus additional territories, the District of Columbia, et cetera, because each state, part of the reason why we need a compact, I think, is because each state has its own rules. That's the problem. So answering a question as broad as that is difficult to do. And that speaks to why something like a compact might be necessary.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Doyle. Dr. Doyle, again, is the president of the American Association of State Counseling Board. I'm enjoying serving on that board with him and other colleagues. So thank you, Dr. Doyle.
You're welcome. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Dr. Otis Gray, if many of you are extremely active with AMHCA, know anything about AMHCA, you know he's legendary with AMHCA. He's been a past president and he's our current treasurer. And Dr. Otis Gray is very active in the Utah Mental Health Counseling Association. And so as part of our roundtable, we want to ask Dr. Gray Otis, what are clinical mental health counselors and organizations doing on the state level to promote passing the counseling compact legislation? What do you see and what is going on even in your state or across the country?
Thanks, Dr. Smith. I've been called a lot of things, but legendary has never been one of them. Anyway, delighted to be with you all, and we are really enthusiastic, both at the national AMHCA and I would say other associations, but we're very enthusiastic in Utah, and I thought I'd just share some of the things that we've done and some of the things we're looking forward to prior to or after January 1st, which is the beginning of our legislative session here in Utah. We spent quite a bit of time engaging our own members in the state chapter. And the idea as we roll forward, we're keeping them informed so that they know that what the Counseling Compact is all about, why it's an important issue for all of our counselors in our state and in other states, and most importantly, how we can better serve the public with an attention to public safety. So we did engage them, and then we developed specific talking points tailored to the different stakeholders. And there are usually other stakeholders in the state. And so we want to make sure that we're addressing concerns or oppositions, questions, and we've gotten some good ones already tonight. We've had a few in Utah, and we've been able to address them. In fact, at one point, somebody asked me, what are the pros and cons of the counseling compact? And I had to stop a real long time and think. I couldn't come up with any cons, not legitimate ones. There's some questions and concerns, but not anything that's a deficit as far as I could tell. But we did want to do some education and solicit support. So we did talk to our related professional associations. We have a workforce work group that includes most of the professionals, the psychologists, the nurse practitioners, the marriage and family therapists, the clinical social workers, and others, substance use disorder counselors. And we wanted to get their backing because when we go to these hearings that Dan mentioned, that'll be taking place in the next couple of months, we want to make sure that we're not going to get anything out of left field. So we wanted them to be aware of it. And we also wanted to kind of show how it might be beneficial to them. So for example, we know that psychologists already have a counseling compact, but social workers and marriage and family therapists and others are looking at that. And they're looking at us to provide a model. We did talk to members of our state licensing board. Again, as was mentioned, they kind of, I wouldn't say are neutral in the sense of what they can do, but they also were very quite enthusiastic. And what we were also looking for is to see if there was any potential problems that they could come up with. And so far, nothing has been raised. And again, we're looking to find out, are there any blind spots from other associations or for our state licensing board or state officials to make sure that we can address those things on the front end instead of being caught short-sighted. Then we're also looking at any of the other potential stakeholders, and as already been mentioned, the governor's office, other state councils in our state have been apprised of this and have already kind of come on board and said, yeah, this is good, let's go forward with that. So we did spend quite a bit of time, a couple of meetings, identifying the key legislators in our state, both in the Senate and the House, that we were looking for bill sponsorship, and also looking kind of to see if there would be somebody that might be identified as opposing the counseling compact legislation. And oddly enough, we found somebody that is sometimes referred to as the bulldog of the Utah State Senate, who was extremely enthusiastic. And this kind of goes in line with previous legislation, including other compacts that have recently been passed by the Utah State Legislature. And so he was very much on board, and he is going to act as our sponsor in the Senate. We got to line up those senators and those representatives that are really going to be in our camp, not just the sponsors, but others who are saying, oh, yeah, this is interesting. This is in keeping what we've done before. And this is a good thing for us to do for counselors and maybe for some others as well. Obviously, we're planning on showing up at all of those committee hearings. They are so important, primarily in answering questions and inquiries and soliciting support. And that won't be taking place quite yet, but we're already lining that up. And then we want, again, to keep our members fully engaged, because there's going to be prime points in time where we are going to want them to reach out to their individual senators in the state, their individual representatives, and heartily endorse this and make them aware of it. So this is an ongoing process that our Legislative Affairs Committee and Chair is heading up. And so we want to stay up to date and engaged, and then we're going to celebrate.
We look forward to the celebration. We get all 10 states on and 10 plus. And so thank you, Dr. Otis Gray Otis, for providing your perspective from Utah, from the association perspective there, and what you all have done and will continue to do. So thank you. And Dr. Otis will be around for additional questions as well as the other panelists. So don't fret. If you have a question, we'll be still happy to address your question. Also part of our roundtable is Dr. Jerry Stevens. She's part of the Maine Mental Health Counselors Association. She's very active with AMHCA, and she has a lot of wisdom. And so she'll share with you the steps that they've taken and are taking as they navigate through the process. Dr. Stevens.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi there. Actually, a lot of it is ditto for what Dr. Otis has already said to you. We spend a lot of time upfront just coming to these types of situations, watching some of the podcasts, attending several of the slideshows, and just really learning as much as we could before we really started gathering support. So we, going to all the different trainings and then reaching out to CSG and talking with Dan and with some of the other folks to be able to help us get going, because we just couldn't figure out, we knew we wanted it, but we didn't have a clue how to begin. So they helped us. And once I understood really what we were trying to do, we got the Maine Mental Health Counselors Association in support and really educating them as to what was happening. We are so fortunate. We found a legislator who was willing to sponsor, who totally understood this and took it and ran with it, and has been like the heart of what we're working with right now. And then we started setting up meetings with CSG and the legislator. And then Maine is in a situation where we have what's called a short legislative term session, and then that really just hears supposedly just emergency bills, but it isn't. It's other bills too. And then we go into a regular session, and of about 300, this is just rounding it, but of about 300 and something bills, only about 70 got through, and our bill was one of them that got through. So we are now in January going to be heard by the full legislative body. So that's really exciting. So a couple of days ago we started really preparing for that. So we also reached out to Georgia and got a lot of information from Georgia about how they went around about their process and what they did. And so after we got all that information, we went to the legislative councils. That's the term I just told you about. We got the bill through, and now we have to move forward and start really educating our legislators. And at the same time, when we started really learning about this, I was passing information on to our counseling board as well. And so that members of the counseling board were beginning to just get information and hearing the language. I didn't assume that they were going to do anything with it, but they started at least hearing the language. And COVID has been a blessing in disguise for this anyway, because we could sit in and observe the meetings. And on several of the meetings, it was brought up that this was in the making and that they needed to start learning about it. So I knew that the information, at least at that point, was getting there. The other piece that happened was with the psych compact. That just was wonderful for us because we were able to watch them. It passed in Maine. So they've already gone through and done a lot of our talking points for us. And as well as because of telehealth and the unfortunate silver lining of COVID, is that we have several committees that are social work and clinicians. And this is the first time in many, many, many years that we've been working together with the social workers. And we got our compact in before they did. So now they've made a commitment to work with us to help us pass this. And then they will be putting their bill in after so that we will help them as well. So they're hoping that ours will get through. So at this point, it really is we're in our letter writing, preparing, educating, and gearing up for testimony, trying to find the right people to do testimony, both in writing and in person, and off we go. So, and watching the other states, we're eager to do this. We'd love to have a seat at the table, of the first 10 states, but just getting into the compact would be wonderful.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Stevens. As you said, the first 10 states get a seat at the table, and that is important. So we want to get that first 10, but we also welcome many more. Dr. Stevens is also part of our special Counseling Compact Committee. This year, we implemented a special committee to do this work and to inform and increase the awareness so that this legislation can pass through. Also, Dr. Ray Otis is a part of the Special Counseling Compact Committee that we instituted this year. So thank you all both. And as Dr. Stevens mentioned, she gathered information from Georgia. Georgia is an AMHCA chapter, and it was the first state in the United States of America to get this legislation passed. So we are grateful to Georgia and all of those who did the work and supported Georgia in doing the work. Also, Maryland has passed the compact, and there are many more. I know Florida is in the process as well and working. And so there are a host of individuals that we have mentioned here and that are present in this town hall at the round table. But we will also have others in which we will show and have on our vodcast that we will be launching soon, talking about the counseling compact. So thank you, Dr. Stevens. We have Ms. Saba Akal. She is an LPC. She's a graduate of Northwestern University, and she's part of our AMHCA Emerging Professional. And so we thought it was very important not only to hear from board of directors members, in which she is actually a member of our board of directors, and she represents the emerging professionals. But it was important for us to have a variety of voices and individuals at the table. And so we wanted to include those who are emerging, the younger ones coming through the profession, so that we hear their voice and that we understand and they're just included. Ms. Saba?
Thank you, Dr. Smith. Hi, everyone. My name is Saba Akal. So like she said, I bring in that emerging professional perspective. And not too long ago, I was a graduate student as well. So that still is fresh. And from this perspective, I believe that the Counseling Compact would allow new graduates to obtain more comprehensive and diverse trainings early on in their career. This would enable them to serve a more vast range of groups and or clients who present with very specific needs that they wish to work with. So for example, as an Arabic speaking clinician, I would be able to serve Arabic speaking groups with specific presenting issues that I typically enjoy with working with that are from different states. I know from personal experience that finding a therapist for a family member, it could be so difficult when they live in a state that the counselor population, the clinician population does not represent their background or their needs or the language that they speak, the first language that they speak. So oftentimes clients with many intersectional and marginalized identities might struggle to find clinicians who are trained to serve their specific needs and often become discouraged from the process altogether. So something like the Counseling Compact would really allow for more access to not only clinicians, but to clients as well. And as an emerging professional, the Counseling Compact would provide greater opportunities overall for clinicians to wish to train and serve populations with these specific needs, allowing them to advance their trainings early on, improve access to services early on, being a few of the reasons why emerging professionals would benefit from the compact.
Thank you. Thank you. And it's good always to have emerging professionals' voice included. So thank you. Thank you. And so we want to move into our Q&A. We will include the roundtable panelists and myself and Ms. Rebecca Woodson, who's our director of events, will help to facilitate the questions that may be in the chat or Q&A. So, pardon me as I begin to scroll through here and kind of sift out the questions. So there's one question: is there a different process for an agency to become a participating member than an independent practitioner? And so Dan, we'll let you chime in on that one.
Well, yeah, I mean, so compacts have to be enacted and become a statute in the state. So they go through the legislative process. They have to be passed by the legislature and then allowed to become law by the governor, either over their signature or, some states, if it lays on their desk a certain amount of days, it's deemed to be approved. So, that's how a state joins. And then as that happens, then the board's charged with doing certain things. So yeah, a practitioner, if they want to participate in the compact, all this will be spelled out on the website, but they'll essentially go to the state board, start the process for the background check, et cetera, because you have to do that. And then, everything else with hope will be completed on the compact website. So yeah, there's a different process. The agency doesn't necessarily, it doesn't have to join. The state is the entity that joins.
Okay. And there are several questions in the chat. So I'll just read the question, and anyone who wants to jump in can jump in and answer the question. The next question is, will there be a published, I'm not sure, I'm just read the question as it's printed. Will there be published each state of the compact's links or references of their Practice Act and jurisprudence requirements?
Oh, yeah. That's how the PT Compact does it. And I would imagine this, you want people to use it, so you need to make it as user-friendly as possible. And so you want to essentially be a one-stop shop. So yeah, there will be, with hope, that'll be up to the Compact Commission. I can't dictate what they're going to do, but if they ask me, I would tell them my best practice would be to, put as much information about a state on that page so that, folks can see that and understand the requirements for that state. It'll also generate reminders to the practitioner that, remember, you're under the Practice Act when you go to Maine. You're not under Connecticut's Practice Act. You're under Maine's Practice Act.
Okay. Another question that we have, Susan states, in our state, we allow folks to be grandparent in. How would this be impacted with the compact?
Yeah, so the way that the project team constructed this is, so it's based on how states currently license. So that's how we took care of the grandparenting provisions. Because, let's say I'm a practitioner. I've been practicing in Kentucky for 15 years. I've got a 48-hour master's degree in counseling. Kentucky now regulates at that 60-hour master's degree level. Well, I'm eligible. Kentucky's eligible to join, and then therefore I can get access to the compact because they've licensed at that 60-hour level for master's degree in counseling. We didn't want to, thankfully, and I'm glad they came up with this. We didn't want to create, a lot of grandparenting provisions in the compact because that can be very confusing. And look, no, that practitioner who has a 40, and the experts, the counselors on the panel can weigh in on this. I'm certainly not a counselor or an expert on this, but if you're a 48-hour master's degree in counseling and you've been practicing for 15 years, even though you don't have a 60-hour degree, I think you're qualified to go to other states, and I think other states would be willing to accept you, and that's what we heard during stakeholder review, and that's how we approached it.
Okay, thank you. And so the next question from Dr. Olivia out of Texas, she asked, will the provisions of the compact apply regardless of whether someone's degree came from a CACREP accredited school?
Yes. So the compact doesn't, the compact recognizes state license. So if you have a license in a member state and that state regulates it the way the compact lays out, then you can get access to the other member states via the compact.
Okay. So we have a question from Larry. Can a state set higher standards for those who live in the state by course requirements or accreditation of graduate program than those who are practicing telemental health under the compact? Or could you move to a state and establish residency solely under the compact licensure requirements?
So again, states preserve their sovereignty under this, so they can set their requirements in any way they want. So yes, if I was from a state that and it had, that was deemed lower requirements, and then yeah, I could practice in your state. I hear this a lot about moving to a state and changing residency in order to sort of game the system. Could it happen? I suppose, but we just haven't seen that with the other licensure compacts. And that's why we tie everything to home state. That's why, you know, the compact data system is going to exist so that states can track people that, you know, potentially, you know, have committed it, have issues with boards in other states. You know, I just, yes, you can set your requirements any way you want to, but, you know, if I'm in a compact member state and I'm licensed and it's in good standing and I've done everything else I need to do to get into the compact, and, you know, there's a lot of trust here. And, you know, I get to come into your state and practice, and, you know, you can go to my state and practice.
Okay, we have a question from Leslie. I keep up on legal changes in states where I am licensed through my state's professional associations. I would likely not join multiple state associations. Might there be a single within compact resource to keep counselors updated on legislative changes across the compact states? Or has there been a consideration of a 1CE legal update requirement for any compact state where we have clients to protect both clients and counselors?
I can't speak to that. No, that hasn't been discussed yet. That'll be something that the Compact Commission takes up, how, you know, robust that website needs to be. But, you know, I think here's an opportunity, if I'm understanding your question, for, you know, the national membership associations to step up and help provide that information. And I'm sure they would, to be a resource for practitioners. Again, the Compact's going to, it wants people to use the commission wants people to use the Compact. They're going to make that website as comprehensive as possible. But, you know, here's an opportunity, I think, for organizations in the profession to step up and help with support the Compact and support the practice, the counselors that are using the Compact.
Most definitely. And you'll see AMHCA moving forward, providing more information and CE webinars in reference to the Compact as relates to ethics and, again, telemental health. So those are things that we have done in the past and we will continue to do. Okay. So we have a question from William. How would malpractice insurance be impacted by becoming a member of the Compact?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. It's not been an impediment for the other professions. You have to have your malpractice insurance. And to my knowledge, it's not been an issue about being recognized in multiple states. From time to time, I mentioned earlier, you do run into issues with state Medicaid programs. I apologize, I'm not sure if you guys are eligible for state Medicaid reimbursement. You know, we had to have a series of long conversations with CMS around Medicare reimbursement. We finally explained to them, and they understood that the privilege to practice or compact privilege is equivalent to a license. But yeah, I mean, I've had these conversations around the psychology interstate compact, and you know, yes, obviously, you know, you're going to have, for your own protection and probably for ethical reasons, you're going to need to have that malpractice insurance. But I'm not aware of an instance where that coverage didn't follow you. You would need to talk to your insurance provider, though, about those issues. That's something way outside my area of expertise. But it has come up and been addressed with other companies.
Okay. And so we have a question from Rebecca Jemison. What are the main concerns that members typically have about the Compact, and how have those been addressed?
One, you know, is that, you know, it takes so long. People are concerned about the cost, and I understand that. So let's go over the cost. So, you know, I like to, my boss always talks about the no surprises rule, and, you know, I love her, but I hate it when she does that. But she's right, you know, no surprises. So you have to keep your state license valid and up to date. And so, you know, there's a cost to that. The Compact Commission can charge a fee, and then the Compact state that you're trying to get a privilege for can charge a fee. Now, it's anticipated the Compact Commission will collect both fees and then remit, but to make it easier on you. But, you know, so those are the fees that you're going to have to pay. The PT Compact encourages its member states to keep that commission or keep that fee at $45, and the commission has set that fee at $45. Some states in the PT Compact do, some states don't. There's a number of states like Maryland that set it about, I think Maryland's about $50 below what the renewal is. So yes, there's certainly going to be a cost, and we hear concerns about that. You know, the cost is the cost, and I'm not trying to tell you it's not important. You know, we all have to deal with those types of things. But you know, please don't forget, you know, the time savings. You know, there's we're working with a profession. Actually, it's social work. We talked about this today. There is a social worker. I think she's a clinical social worker. She's been president of a couple of national organizations. She's trying to get a license in the state, and they won't license her because she can't produce a letter from the professor or whoever supervised her clinical practicum. And, that person's dead. And the fact that she holds multiple licenses is not carrying any weight with with the state board. And so you won't have to deal with that stuff anymore. So that's something to keep in mind. So the fees, the time it takes to get stood up are always concerns. And, the only way to deal with them is just deal with them head on. I mean, yes, there will be a cost to this. It's to the compacts and the professions benefit to keep those costs as low as possible, but there'll be fees attached to the compact program.
And as we're talking about fees, we definitely want to acknowledge ACA for the funding they provided for the compact. But there's something for every organization to do, every individual to do, in order to advocate for the counseling compact and to advance the compact. And that's why we wanted to have a town hall tonight that was open to the public, leaders, members, friends of AMHCA, just anyone who was interested and could help us advance the counseling compact. It was open to legislators. Okay, so we have three more questions, I believe, here in the chat, in the Q&A before we move to the chat. How does this work for billing insurance or Medicaid? I think you somewhat answered that.
Yeah, obviously, once it's up and running, you'll need to check with those providers. But again, and I know with state Medicaid programs, at times some professions have run into issues, but a meeting has solved that. And you won't have to do that meeting. The compact commission will handle that for you. Because, if you're running into it, other professionals are running into it and they want to make sure it gets addressed. But as far as insurance reimbursements, again, to my knowledge, and I think I would know, I would have heard there's not been any issues. Now, maybe some providers are a little bit easier about it than others, but you'll need to take that up with the insurance providers. And certainly that's where the compact commission can communicate with the other compact commissions and have some best practices for its privilege holders about how to navigate those issues.
Okay. And another question, I'm not sure we've asked this question or not. How will sanctions against a licensee work with the compact across other compact member states?
Sure. So the state regulatory board has the ability, it's enshrined in the compact, it's enshrined in the provisions, to act against someone practicing in their state via the compact in the same manner that they can act against someone that they've issued a license to. So, again, we're not creating a special class of practitioner where the state board has to get permission from their home state or permission from the commission to investigate them. If I'll use Maine and Utah. I mean, if I'm in Utah practicing under this compact, then I'm under the authority of that agency. So if I don't adhere to their laws and regs, and if I don't adhere to their practice act, they can take action against me. The compact creates a means whereby the state boards coordinate. So, if I get disciplined in Utah and I have to go through the hearing process there, Utah is going to notify the other compact member states that that's happening. And, they won't upload the disciplinary record because, I have due process rights, but they can notify the other member states that, hey, this is occurring with Dan Logston. You need to be aware of it. They'll also notify my home state. Once that case is adjudicated, and let's say it goes against me, then they will take that, the way the other compacts work is they will take that record and they will provide it to the home state so that the home state can take action or not take action. They'll get to determine that against me. But, Utah can suspend my privilege there and say, no, you can't ever come back, or no, you're barred from here for 3 years. In the same way they take action against their own practitioners. So the data system will help the member states coordinate around these investigations. All the member states will be aware of something that is going on in one member state, and then they can decide for themselves in the aftermath whether or not they want to take action themselves or suspend somebody's practitioner's privilege. We don't make it automatic, and the reason we don't make it automatic is, you take cannabis, for instance. We've been told by boards in Oregon that if our practitioner gets, in trouble over possession of cannabis and it's not enough to be you can't be considered trafficking, we're not going to take any action against them. And there's just other things like that some state boards will get exercised about, some won't. So we give them the option, but they're all going to have the information. And certainly, serious crimes related to the practice, I think we can count on the state boards to enforce those.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. And then we have a statement from Barton Schulman. And the statement is, when I checked with my malpractice carrier, CPH, which is a partner of AMHCA, they told me that they cover me no matter where I'm practicing. And so it's kind of what we typically thought. So as we begin to wind down our time together, those were the questions from the Q&A section. And so I want to check the chat briefly just to make sure we've answered all the questions, and we'll be wrapping up our time together. And so in the chat, I'm looking through a few questions. Hello from those in Texas and the president of the Texas Mental Health Association. I am, okay. Copies of the PowerPoint, in fact, the entire presentation will be posted on our website. And on our website, we have other information that links into and shares detail about the counseling compact. So you will see that uploaded. Give us a few days and we'll definitely get it uploaded. There were other questions about liability insurance. I think we've covered that. There's a question that says, what does social worker and physician assistants use considering current federal preferences? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't work with the physicians. Well, actually, that's not true. I do work with physicians assistants compact, but it's not. It's still in the stakeholder review process, and we just started social work. We're still at the very beginning of that, so I apologize. Maybe another panelist can address that.
Okay, that may be a question that we kind of follow up on, and that we follow up with the audience on that particular question. And as a follow-up question to what was asked, will this negatively impact hiring of non-military, in parentheses, civilian LPCs, as spouses can receive spouse preference as well as retirees? So I'm not sure, maybe a question we need to follow up on. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, states typically have a lot of provisions that are designed to help military spouses, but they're different in every state, and some states are better about enforcing them than others. And that's why the Department of Defense likes compacts, because they're binding, and states know exactly their obligations, and interstate compact statutes override conflicting state statutes. That's why they're so powerful. And so all these compacts provide robust provisions for military spouses, and again, it's uniform.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so again, we're answering most of the questions. If there's a question that you need more explanation on, please do not hesitate to email me, and we'll make sure that our committee addresses the question. Just email me at president@amhca.org. Okay. And so we're going to almost finish up here. Another question: can you repeat which two states are part of the compact now? We know those are Georgia and Maryland. Another question: please speak to the efforts to ultimately make the counseling compact CACREP only. I think we've addressed that. While it's not in the language of the counseling compact, it is clear that there are parties working to make CACREP only. That would actually reduce the number of qualified counseling professionals who can get licensed and who could participate in the counseling compact. This is highly concerning to many mental health professionals.
I promise you that's not true. We are a membership organization for states, and we don't design mechanisms that benefit organizations. That's always a concern. And then once people see the document, they see that it only advantages the practitioners in the states. It doesn't advantage certain organizations. There's nothing to stop CACREP from, I think there's a couple states that they only license you if you come from a CACREP accredited program. Now, CACREP could go state by state and get that kind of provision passed, that, and so that would be how states license. Nothing stopping them from doing that. But The compact again relies on that state license. It can't provide that kind of benefit. So, and that's certainly not the plan or the intent. If it wasn't for Lynn Lindy explaining it to me every few weeks, I really wouldn't know that much about KCREP. And if that was the plan, I'd know everything about it.
Dr. Smith, can I comment on that too?
Yes, Jeff.
So regardless of how you feel about KCREP, there need to be 10 states to form a compact. And there aren't 10 states that require KCREP for licensure, 3 or 4. So sort of by definition, that couldn't be in the requirements. Otherwise, there wouldn't be enough states to form a compact in the first place. So I'm a fan of KCREP. I support that, but there are some legitimate points in that question that there would be some restriction. Now, again, if that were the requirement, remember, it would have to be the requirement of the state. So anyone who is already licensed wouldn't have to have graduated from a KCREP program. That's the compact applies to states, not to individuals, right, Dan? So,
Yes.
So the fear, there's a lot of fear out there that I think it goes to that question of, why would someone oppose this? Which I'll comment in just one second. But even if there were a KCREP requirement, there would need to be 10 states that could meet that requirement in order to be eligible to be a compact state, and there aren't 10 states. So, but there are people who fear losing their license, and that went to that grandfathering question earlier. If you're a licensed practitioner and your state currently, as Dan said, the current requirements of the state makes them eligible, then the individual could participate in the compact. So this is a state-to-state agreement, not an individual agreement. I do feel the need to comment on the fear question, if that's okay, Dr. Smith, because I think it's good to put that out there. Is why would people oppose this? And for ASCB, where we try to be a place where the different member boards can come together and talk, one of the things that we all notice is that states have different requirements. And so why would someone be opposed? I think the answer is because a state that had a different requirement from your state, by participating in the compact, those counselors from that other state could then serve people in your state. To me, that's fear, right? There's a 60 credit hour requirement. These are duly licensed people in another state. And I'll speak a little bit more for myself here than for ASCB necessarily, but as I interact with licensing board members from around the country, I have never encountered a state where I say, wow, we don't want those people practicing in our state. That's what we'd be saying if we were not in favor of a compact, that the differences in their licensing requirements are such that they would not be safe to practice in our state. The differences are things like the number of supervised experience hours. In Virginia, where I was on the licensing board, we called that residency, but many states call it supervised experience, hours under supervision. 4,000, 3,500, 3,000, those are typical numbers. Is it that different for someone to have had 3,000 versus 3,500 supervised hours and to have thus and been licensed for several years without issue? Personally, don't think there is a big difference there. But that's the type of fear that some folks, I think, do have. And we should honor that and be honest about that answer, right? Those are good questions in the chat there about that. So along with the fear, I think there's a loss of control. People would come and serve clients in our state who are licensed by a different licensing board, not our licensing board. That's pretty provincial, I think, in my view. But those are the reasons why I think people sometimes are hesitant, because you lose control over who can practice by serving clients or patients in your state that wouldn't be under your licensing board. On the other side of the equation, and this is more from AASCB's perspective, I think we felt like our profession is way, way, way overdue in addressing this. Will any compact be perfect? Probably not. The devil's in the details, of course, but it's certainly better than what we have now, which is nothing. And this was a compact that was put into place by a representation of a lot of different members, including a representative from AASCB, to develop the draft language. So, but a couple of folks have asked it in the chat too, and so I think it's fair to acknowledge some of the fear that's out there from folks. But that also addresses that KCREP question.
Okay.
Dr. Smith, can I also make a comment about that? And
Yeah.
sort of ditto to what you're saying Kevin. It's in Maine, we've got two big issues that have been brought to us. One is just the assurance that our regulatory board will still be the regulatory board in charge, so that they don't lose their power. And the other is the fear of having people. We have a conversion law that says that it's prohibited to minors, and the fear that somebody from a state that doesn't have that law would come in and try to start doing conversion therapy with minors in Maine. And so we've had to assure people that you still have to follow the rules of the laws of Maine. And so that just can't happen. So that's what you're saying is it actually is being talked about, that those fear things are being talked about.
Okay, absolutely great. And thank you. You answered one of the questions that was coming up next. Okay. And so there's a thank you comment from Courtney. I'm just moving through trying to get to the questions in light of time. So there's another question. Are KCREP versus non-KCREP LPCs, LMHCs being addressed? I think we've answered that question, so that is covered. And so there's a question, are we working with ACA already? As Dr. Dorr mentioned, he's president of the American Association of State Counseling Board, in which I sit on as the president of AMHCA, the president of ACA, as well as MBCC. President Dr. Dotson, KCREP is on there. There's a host of leaders in the profession who are there. So we come together to meet, to discuss, and make sure we're updated and just building that collaboration. And so definitely Dr. Dorr can answer more questions in reference to that if needed. Okay. There's another KCREP question. I think we addressed that. Would there be coordination with KCREP to grandfather non-KCREP by submission to education by comparison to certify as a KCREP equivalent education? For federal, we have to establish it before person applies, so can submit. Okay.
Can I add something there? And Dan, correct me if I'm wrong. There's not a mention of KCREP in the model legislation. There's no mention of what test I took or how many hours I was supervised. The only requirement is that I've been licensed, fully licensed, and I have no issues against me in terms of how I practice. Did I miss something here?
No, that's right.
I think all of these questions about KCREP are basically moot by virtue of the fact that whether I took this test or whether I came from a KCREP accredited program or not, or whether I had so many supervised hours, all of that is not material. The only thing that the Counseling Compact addresses is whether or not a person has been fully licensed as specified and doesn't have any issues with this previous record. So everybody, and that's, how many hours I took in my graduate program, not material. It's only material as to whether I've been licensed by my state so that I can now have the privilege to practice in other states. And we all know it's really our experience that makes the difference. You can't tell me that one person from one program or one test or so many hours is somehow better qualified than another. So let's not worry about that one.
Okay. So we're going to move through the other questions quickly as we begin to wrap up. Have we identified those Florida state legislators who would be supportive of the compact and those who would be negative towards it? I know we had our board meeting last night, and it was mentioned by Dr. Aaron Norton, who's our Southern Regional Representative for AMHCA in Florida, obviously in that area. And he just provided updates and that they're progressing through getting the compact passed. Dr. Deidre Sanders Barnett Sanders. She's the president of the Florida Mental Health Counseling Association. She's also the chair of AMHCA's membership committee. And so they have a pulse on how it is progressing. So we can definitely connect with them and get a more detailed update from them and share that with you. Thanks for your question, Howard. Thank you. And so, yes, the process has started in Florida, and we will connect you with those in Florida. With the Florida Mental Health Counseling Association to give you some updates. I know they worked really hard to advance the compact, And so we'll again make that connection. Okay. How will the compact communicate the contract to federal systems, OPM, DOD, so on and so forth? So I'm not sure that's an answer.
I don't think it will. The compact only communicates with its member states. Now, so I apologize. I really don't understand that question, but it's not authorized to interface with unless the commission grants it that ability, but it interfaces with member states.
Okay. Dr. Stevens, is a question for you, and I'm not sure if you answered it or not. You showed that 6 approved and 4 were against. Did you follow up and find out why those 4 opposed?
Yeah, the answer basically is that we believe it was party line, but this vote was only just to get the bill in, so it didn't matter. Really what matters is what begins in January. And that's when we really start digging in and marketing. And if there are people who do oppose, then we'll go after that. But for this moment, it didn't matter. We just needed to get the bill to be approved.
Okay. And Dr. Dikieta makes a comment that if we need a federal GS employee, she volunteers. So thank you. I think we may answer this question. Why would a party be against the compact? I think we kind of talked about that in Dr. Doyle, maybe with the fears and other concerns, we've addressed that. Okay. If you want to be more involved in this process and follow the legislative sessions, what is the best place for a therapist to start with being more involved? From Natasha. Is there anyone who wants to take a stab at that? And I would jump in and say, if you want to get involved, definitely contact your local association, your state association, and get involved from that perspective. If you have questions, contact AMHCA from our office. And again, you can reach out to me at president@amhca.org, and we'll be happy to connect you with specific persons or associations in your state or your area. But that is a good question, because we want everyone to get involved. And so getting involved with your state association will allow you to really definitely be at the grassroots level, but help everything move forward. Okay, I'm checking for the last few questions.
Can I add one more thing in that regard? Yes, by all means, contact your association. But if you want more information for yourself, we haven't mentioned, there's a wonderful website. It's called Counseling Compact, one word, counselingcompact.org. It was not only good to answer your questions, but to help disseminate information and educate others. So Dan did a great job of putting that together, and it's a terrific resource in so many different ways.
Thank you. Provided some of that information as well on our website, and we'll be sending it out to our membership as well in our newsletter. Mr. Dan, were you going to say something?
Oh, I was just going to say, if you look at it and you think, you got any suggestions about documents that we should put on there, or different types of infographics, just give us, shoot us an email, and we'll see if we can't get that done. I mean, we're open to suggestions.
Okay. And so I'm scrolling through the chat. We'll almost finish, you all. Hang in there. And so we have a thank you from Dr. Dotson, who's the president of NBCC. She's with us. Thank you for being with us, Dr. Dotson. She just says, thank you for holding this session. Dr. Smith, the information was fantastic. Thank you for being here and for your support. Thank you. Another thank you. The information was helpful. Okay, I am scrolling through. Okay, what states other than Georgia and Maryland are likely to join the compact before July 2022?
Oh, so it's pending. It's currently pending in Ohio and North Carolina. I think it just had a good day in the Senate, so I think it's likely to get passed in Ohio before they break. But if not, early next year. North Carolina, I don't really know what's going on in North Carolina. There's, the governor says he didn't call them in. They say they called themselves in, but they're passing bills, so we hope they'll pass this one. Maine, Utah, I know Iowa, Tennessee, Alabama. It looks good for Florida. I met with the Mississippi board back during the summer. I'm not sure how they're going to proceed. Certainly Kentucky, they've got a bill that's ready to go. I've been, that's kind of why I'm a little bit distracted. I've been looking for my list that I keep, but the last count, it was 14 states that we were looking at. Oh, it's going to be filed in Virginia as well. So Dr. Smith, I can send you a list that you can send out to folks of the states that had either told us that they're going to file legislation this year. We feel confident legislation is going to be filed there, or bills have already been submitted, pre-filed.
Okay. So thank you very much. And just another comment from Andrea, if you need a federal GS employee, there's another volunteer. From Leslie, thank you for your leadership. And from Horseman, thank you so much. This has been very helpful. They will make every effort to join future town halls. Thank you so much. And so that is the end of the questions and comments in the Q&A and the chat. And so we want to wrap up. Thank you all for participating in our town hall. A special thanks to our special guest, Mr. Dan Loxton, and thank you to Dr. Kevin Doyle. But we also want to thank Dr. Jerry Stevens and as well Dr. Gray Otis for their work and participation. Thank you for serving with AMHCA's special committee on the Counseling Compact. So thank everyone so much for participating, for coming to our town hall. Again, thank you to AMHCA's Counseling Compact Committee for your work in making this possible. Thank you to the Board of Directors, and thank you to Rebecca Whitson, our AMHCA Director of Events. Thank you all so much again, and we hope that you have a great evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.